Good evening. Welcome to Wednesday night Bible study. And tonight we find ourselves in part 3, Paul in prisons. And we will be beginning with chapter 27 tonight. Sunday morning's message, we did the entire chapter 26, which was Paul's trial before King Agrippa. What an interesting account where Paul is privileged to address the king with his complaints. And in so doing, he also gave his personal testimony to the king, how he had been saved, how he himself had been persecuted, and how he had been at one time a persecutor of the church, persecuting many all the way to death. And so as he's telling King Agrippa his life story, he is wanting the king to understand that the man standing before him that day was not the same man that started out on the road to Damascus to destroy the people of the way, which Christians were known as until Antioch. Interesting how Paul, he's not really pleading his case. He's just simply telling the kings the facts and details. And then the king says that famous phrase that's been written into a song that is in our hymnals. In fact, I think it's about time to tell Dora we need to sing that again. Today, Paul, thou almost persuadest me to be a Christian. And Paul's reply was, I altogether would that thou were. Paul's desire was to see King Agrippa fully surrendered and fully saved. We don't know much about King Agrippa's life after this, but wouldn't it be interesting, perhaps one night, 2 o'clock in the morning, and the king woke up and he's thinking about that day of his mortal demise. Darla and I had those discussions today. Number one, we need to get our will in order. Number two, we need to get our plots bought at the Stone Creek Cemetery. And we both rattled back and forth the consequences of not getting that done. You know, when you're in your 70s, you don't have as many days in front of you as you have behind you. And sometimes the inevitable occurs. In fact, one of my horse friends that I have camped with many, many times, his name is Julius. He died this past weekend at the age of 36. It's just surreal. That's way, 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 way too young. And I have no idea what the cause of death was. But there's a date appointed for each one of us. Father, we appoint ourselves tonight to learn from your word some of the trials and tribulations of Paul, so that we too can see that by following you, even though we may be tossed and turned, we can still be right side up when we are in your will. No matter where it takes us in our life, no matter what hurdles we climb or ditches we go through, on the other side, we will be in your divine will when we follow you. We ask all this in Jesus' holy name tonight. Amen. We're going to begin Acts 27, verse 1. And when it was determined that we should sail into Italy, they delivered Paul and certain other prisoners unto one named Julius, a centurion of Augustus's band. Isn't it interesting? On this Wednesday night, I tell you about my horse friend Julius going across the Great Divide. And in our first verse of Scripture, we read his name. His mother's Diane, his dad is Jack, and I have posted it on my Facebook page a long time ago when Riley went camping with us down at Salt Fork. It was me and Darla, and I don't know if we took any dogs with us then or not, but definitely my horse would have been Ben at the time. And Jack and Diane and Julius were camped beside us, and Diane brought her horse over and put Riley on her, and Diane led Riley all over horse camp, and there was not a more thrilled little girl on planet Earth that night than Riley Randolph, riding her gallant steed borrowed from Julius's mom. Thank you, Zane. And hey, even Seth was with us tonight, all the way on the high seas. Seth and Melissa are way down in the Bahamas area of the coastal waters. They were supposed to go to an island yesterday, but the weather would not allow them to go there. And Seth, guess what is on the menu tonight? Sailing around islands as Paul sails from Caesarea. He's trying to get to Rome. But his trip was fraught with many an adventure. You know, when we're reading the Word, sometimes it helps us to listen to what we're reading. I had this epiphany this morning. You know, if I was reading my 3 chapters a day or my 20 minutes a day, there's a good chance that I would have just zoomed over this. And when it was determined that I get to thinking, who's the we? Well, obviously the other prisoners that are mentioned just in a few words, but also with Paul on this sailing journey was his good friend Luke, who wrote the book of Acts. And then also one of his friends, I practiced this all day, Aristarchus, a Thessalonian, and we are going to be looking at him again because he's mentioned in other verses in the Bible. He was a friend of Paul, and I will tell you this, when you're reading in 99% of the words in the New Testament, when you see a C and an H side by side, it's the K sound. Mostly what we think of the C and H beside each other is a little different sound. Like my middle name is Chester, and that CH is ch, not k. So it's Aristarchus. He was a good friend of Paul. So that's the we. And anytime you know you're sailing into new waters, new adventures, it's absolutely awesome to have a confidant you can lean on. In ministry, my confidence is David Wyrick of Clean Air Christian Radio. My Gary, who is a truck driver and called to preach. I lost my main, one of those individuals, Pastor Alvin, in January. And Pastor Karen, I've even called Brother Johnson. He's a pastor in Coshocton. And say, hey, I just need to bounce something off of you. You know, sometimes we need to seek advice and wisdom beyond our own comfort zone. And if we make it there, in one of the verses further down this chapter, somebody sure was wishing they listened to the advice of Paul. Other prisoners. Let's address that. The word other here is unique to the other times we translate other. The Greek here implies that they were prisoners of a different class. Now, Paul had appealed to Caesar, so he was being sent to Rome. In fact, the last verse of chapter 26, King Agrippa says to Festus, had Paul not appealed to Caesar, Agrippa would have set him at liberty. In other words, Agrippa was going to let him go. But because he appealed to Caesar, King Agrippa's hands were tied because Paul demanded to be heard by Caesar. He was a Roman by birth, and so he had that right, and he took that right. And if we make it clear to the end, we're going to find out that Paul, even though he was a prisoner in Rome, he lived in his own house with his own guard, and I guarantee you his guard was his slave. Hey, would you get me that? Would you go over here and take care of that? Because when he was under house arrest, so to speak, people could come and go as they wanted. And Connie's with us. Connie, how's the sound? She's just apologizing for being 11 minutes late. Better late than never, Connie, is what they say. But so Luke and his friends are now on a journey to Rome. And there were more than one class of prisoners. I looked at all the theologians. Some said it could have been those that appealed to Caesar, or those who had committed high crimes and misdemeanors, and they were being funneled to Rome. You know, like that game of hot potato we talked about Sunday, when Felix passed the hot potato to Festus, and Festus passed it to King Agrippa. And at the end of Sunday morning's message, King Agrippa passed it to Augustus Caesar when he sent Paul to Rome. Verse 2. And entering into a ship of Adramyttium, they launched, meaning to sail by the coasts of Asia, one Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, being with us. And that's the friend that we talked about. And he is also mentioned in Acts 20 in verse 4 as being with Paul. And one of the writers point out, based on the town and based on the seaport of Mysia, that this would have been in the autumn of AD 62. That's when Paul and his prisoners were sailing to Rome in AD 62. Isn't it amazing? We are reading an account of a voyage 2,000 years ago, like it was on the front page of the Times Reporter this morning. And just a little more history on Aristarchus, the Macedonian. He stayed with Paul during his full 2 years of imprisonment. He was in prison, when we just dealt with Felix, Festus, and Agrippa. He was in jail a full 2-year stint. And theologians believe that Aristarchus was with Paul that entire time. And that's one of the reasons he accompanied him to Rome. And you can also read about him in Colossians 4 and 10, where he shared Paul's imprisonment. Probably one of the greatest robbers of the spirit of our humanity is loneliness. Talk to anybody that works in a nursing home. Those patients are lonely. Why are they lonely? Because nobody comes to visit them. Why don't they come to visit them? Because when they get visited, all they do is cry, wanting to go home with the one who visited them. And that one who visited can't take that, and so they just quit coming. They don't come. They just sit there and they look out the window waiting for somebody to come and visit them. So they die lonely. Well, Lee, we didn't do that to mine. Well, praise the Lord. But 27 years working at the nursing home, Darla will tell you, in the real world, nope. They're there alone. And I just find it awesome that while Paul was in prison for 2 full years, he had constant companionship. Let me ask you a question, and I'm going to ask myself the same question. Do you love a friend enough to serve the same prison term with them so they're not alone? We'd have to think about that for a while, wouldn't we? Well, Lee, I got a spouse, and I got kids, and I got responsibilities, and I got mortgage payments and car payments, and I just couldn't take that much time off. I'll buy that. One of the things that Jesus tells us to do is to visit the widows and the orphans. And he is essentially begging us, asking us, then plain out telling us not to neglect the neglected. Verse 3, and the next day we touched at Sidon, and Julius courteously entreated Paul and gave him liberty to go unto his friends and to refresh himself. So here the head Roman centurion, when they touch land, what's the first thing he does? He goes to Paul and he entreats him. He courteously, I like how it throws that in there. So he somehow in that voyage, Julius, the centurion, and Paul, they must have stood on the rail of the ship talking to where, I won't say he fell in love with him, but he came to respect him. Years and years and years and years ago, in fact, I can tell you it was about 36 or 37 years ago, Darla and I met a couple not far from where we live. How'd we meet them? I had a 1969 step-side Chevy C10 pickup that I decided I was selling. And they came to look at it. And when he got here and looked at it, as much as he liked it, he said, I can't afford it. And we sat together, him and his wife, and me and Darla, on our front porch. And we visited, I know, for an hour and a half. And finally they said, well, we better get home. When they got in their car and drove down the road, Darla and I looked at each other and we said, that's a friendship we need to cultivate. And a couple months later, we decided that we was going to do that. And so we drove down to their house. They told us where they lived. And moving van was backed up to the house and they was moving down south. So we met some awesome people that we really was looking forward to becoming friends. And that's the kind of feeling that I get between Julius and Paul. There must have been some chemistry. There was with King Agrippa. You almost persuaded me. And if you hadn't appealed to Caesar, I'd have let you go. So there must have been something winsome and inviting about Paul's spirit. And you know, that should say something to everybody under the sound of my voice tonight. It is so easy to be negative. Mary Poppins, accentuate the positive. And a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. Approach matters. Attitude matters. Tone matters. The way you look at someone as you're talking matters. If you're intending to have a warm and winsome conversation while you're talking to your good friend about how much you appreciate them and how much you care about them and their families, and you wonder what's going on with their lives, and did you catch that? I personally find it very irritating. You're at lunch with someone and the whole time you're at lunch with them, they're looking at their phone more than they're listening to what's going on. That's the day and age in which we live. It is an addiction. A lot of people don't want to admit it, but it is. I just found it interesting that he courteously entreats Paul to go at liberty to his friends and to refresh himself. If you look at your Good Study Bible with the Strong's Concordance numbers, you'll find that to refresh himself is one Greek word, and the Strong's number is 1958. And it means in our language, our vernacular today, kind attention, and others will say to receive attention. When either Teddy or Paco or both of them are on my lap in the evenings, you never have to guess who's wanting attention. When Teddy wants your attention, he will, if he's laying down, he will stand up and he will face you, and he'll take his right front paw, never his left, he'll take his right front paw, he'll scratch and dig at your hand until you put your hand on top of his head and pat him. You put your hand back down on your lap, he's scratching your hand again. Pat me some more, master. What does Paco do? He licks you. That's his way of saying, pat me, master. the centurion was saying to Paul, hey, go visit your friends. When you're done, come back. Or when we're ready to sail, I'll let you know. There was no fear that Paul and his other companions, Luke or the rest of them, or the other prisoners, that they were going to escape. Did you ever watch any of the Chain Gang movies? A complete trust is how I see that happening. Verse 4. And when they had launched from thence, the place where their boat touched the ground, we sailed under Cyprus, because the winds were contrary. Seth, if you're still with us, I cannot remember the exact cause why you guys were not allowed to go to the original island in your cruise. I read it this morning, I think 3 a.m. or something. And so they ended up doing crafts on board the ship, and Melissa did a canvas painting. I think she called it tulips, if my memory's correct. Passing the time and then having fun, and then I think tomorrow they're getting to sail to another island for some tropical fun. Lee, are you ever going to go on a cruise? Absolutely not. Maybe someday, you could twist my arm to going on to a cruise that's gospel music the whole time, and we'd sail to Alaska or one of the tropical islands. There's one of the islands down there that you can ride Pasofino horses at. Yeah, I'd do that. So now they're getting to sail, but the winds are contrary. The wind was blowing from the westward, probably with a touch to the north, which was adverse. They sailed under the lee, that's Lee, of Cyprus, keeping it on their left and steering between it and the mainland of Phoenicia. So if you open your Bible's map in the back and you find those places, you'll see where they was going along the coasts and ducking under the winds. They're trying to go one direction, and the winds were contrary to their movement in that particular direction. I have had contrary winds in my life for almost 3 full weeks now. I've fallen 3 times this winter. Not old people falls. All 3 falls were an accident. I fell off the top platform. It's not the step. It's you're at the top when you're standing on this platform of the tractor, and then you turn around and you sit down in the seat. And I have my winter hood on the tractor, which is canvas that encloses the motor and the windshield. And when the fan is running to cool the radiator, it brings all that warm air back to where you're sitting in the tractor. It's an open cab, but when you've got all that warm air coming off that engine up where you're at, it can be really, really cold out, and it's reasonably comfortable inside. It's called a heater hood. Well, typically when I climb out of the tractor, when the heater hood is on, I turn around backwards, put my hand on the windshield shroud, and put my hand on the post that holds the roof up on my tractor, and then I back out. And as my left foot went from the top platform down to the first step down, while that foot is in mid-flight to the step, my right foot slipped, came out from under me. Now that right foot was on the platform, the top level, and I literally fell backwards, straight backwards. And Zane is right. He said, Marky Kimball says we need to put bubble wrap around you when you're working. I helped Marky and Dan yesterday and today, so it's in their vested interest to keep Pap well. I love going over there and helping them. And I took my tape measure, and when I'm standing on that platform to the top of my head, from there to the ground is 8 feet. And I landed not quite flat. I landed mostly on my left side, my right side, my right hip, my right elbow, and my right shoulder smacked the ground. Then 3 or 4 weeks after that, I'm installing my brand new industrial floor model drill press. It's taller than I am. I can drill a 1-inch hole just like a knife through butter. I need that capability with some of the things I'm doing. And I gave the old floor model drill press to Zane, who was with us on his lunch break. I don't know if he's still there or not. And when I gave that to him, I moved the location of the new press, different part of the shop, and I was taking out the old floor fasteners that held his press in place, and I was pulling them out of the concrete. And if you've heard the story before, my 4-foot crowbar slipped off the head of the bolt, and I got slammed. I was pulling with all my strength. And I hit the floor, the concrete floor. When I landed on my right side from the top of the tractor, I landed on the gravel driveway in front of the workshop. And when I fell on the concrete floor in the workshop, landed on my left side, and my hip hit first, then my left elbow hit second, and my shoulder hit third. And if my head hit the concrete, I don't remember. And then the last ice storm of the winter, it's probably 4 weeks ago now, we had freezing rain. When I went out to fire up in the morning, my left foot slipped on a piece of firewood that had frozen rain on it, and I fell backwards again on my whole left side, and I landed in all the wood. The evening before, I had taken my hoe and I pulled the wood stack down, because I stacked my wood 9 foot high, and I pulled it down, so when I went to fire up the next morning, I didn't have to reach up there and try and get that wood. And so that's the 3 times I've fallen, and the cumulative effect of those 3 falls. I haven't slept good for a month. And when I go to get out of this chair after tonight's Bible study, it will probably take me 10 minutes to get out of the chair. The work that I have wanted to do the end of this winter, I have not been able to do because I'm just physically not able. So I've been doing maintenance and repair work on my farm equipment, and you might have heard my manure spreader went out of duty on the last load of manure that I spread, which was Thursday and Friday of last week, and so I've got it tore apart in the workshop, and I have parts ordered that are not here yet. And Dan and Marky that I helped, I took my backhoe over to their house and dug out 2 pine trees that they wanted taken out of their yard. And so I went over and did that and took care of the stumps, took care of the treetops, and put them in special places to prevent erosion. And it was an awesome day yesterday, just like today. And I thought, time to do some routine maintenance on the backhoe. So I greased. I still have one fitting. I found a fitting that I didn't know was there, and I told myself 4 times yesterday to grease it, and I never did. And now that I'm telling you, I remember I did not grease that fitting. So maybe tomorrow, if I remember. And I was trying to lubricate the shifters and the accelerators, and I had Darla sitting in the cab moving them while I'm down underneath lubricating. And when I would go to get down so that I could lay down on a sheet of cardboard and turn upside down to reach the oil can up in there to the linkages, I'm not exaggerating when I say it took me at least 5 full minutes to lay down on my back. My hips hurt, they're tight. Both arms hurt. The right arm hurts really bad. Yeah. I just had to keep moving a little bit at a time, and then finally when I'd get my knees to the right spot, then I would just kind of fall over. I couldn't lay myself down. I would just simply fall down on the cardboard and turn over and go to work. Why am I telling you that story? I'm not doing what I want to do right now. My original plan for this point in the winter, I intended to start at the first post on my 2 miles of fence, and I intended to fix every rotted, broken fence post, and to literally by the end of April to have been done on the whole 2 miles. I haven't got any of that done. None. I don't have cows in the fence anymore, so why does it matter? Well, I've toyed with the idea of end of May buying 2 or 3, 500 or 600 pound steers and just turn them out. Let them eat down the multiplier rows and just graze the whole 40 acres. I don't know how much a dent they'd put in it, but at the end of the season, either take them back to the stock market or whole cow hamburger them. Right now my fence is down in too many places, from dead ash trees being on the fence and fence posts rotted off and the posts laying on the ground. That was for me, work project this year, and for a month I haven't been able to hardly move. The last 2 nights I have slept in the recliner because I physically can't tolerate laying flat in bed. I don't sleep good in the recliner either. Darla talked me into taking a sleeping pill for the first time in my life 2 nights ago. Yesterday she come with another. I said, nope, not doing it. It didn't do one thing for me except make my mouth feel raw. So I don't know if I had an allergic reaction to it or what, but my mouth was all wrinkled up inside, and I said, no, I'm not doing that. I'll just go without sleep. So when I look at these guys on their journey and what they're heading into, and knowing where I am, I don't know if I'm going out of this thing yet or not. I couldn't get into the doctor till April the 28th start rehab. I said, put me on a call list. Well, at 10 o'clock last night, they called and said, hey, how about April the 4th? Yes. So I will go see my doctor April the 4th, and knowing the way he works, April the 5th, I'll be in rehab. I definitely, positively need rehab for my hip joints. They don't ache, they don't hurt, but they do. It's an odd thing, Just sitting here, no, there's no pain there. But yet when I go to get up, there's no strength there, and it does hurt. And if I was to walk from here to the door over there right now, it would probably take me 30 steps, little tiny steps. 5. And when we had sailed over the sea of Sicilia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra, a city of Lycia. And there the centurion found a ship of Alexandria sailing into Italy, and he put us therein. Okay, write this down. Acts 27, verse 6. This one verse is proof enough. You need a good study Bible, or you need access to commentaries, because hidden in this verse is the story behind the story. It's not readily apparent. You only learn the behind-the-scenes story when you read the commentaries, because the ship from Alexandria should not have been there. It had not intended to sail there. Remember those contrary winds? They had to alter their course. And this ship of Alexandria, it also had to alter its course. Let's look at verse 7. And when they had sailed slowly many days, and scarce were come over against Sindus, the wind not suffering us, we sailed under Crete over against Salome. This is the second time they've encountered contrary winds, but it says it a little bit different. The wind not suffering us. That's old King James. Lee, what's it mean? The wind was blowing us off course. Well, the prior verse, verse 6, this ship of Alexandria, it got blown off course, and so Julius the centurion, trying to get to Italy, and this ship of Alexandria was taking a load of wheat from Egypt to Rome. Both these ships were now in this one common port. Julius found out the ship from Alexandria with its load of wheat was heading to Rome. He said, hey, do me a large. These people are all going to Rome. Would you take them on your vessel? And the shipmaster agreed. So off they sail. Verse 8. And hardly passing it, came unto a place which is called Fair Havens, nigh whereunto was the city of the sea. Fair Havens was a seaport on the southeastern edge of the island of Crete. Just find it interesting that they have gone through these rough seas. And folks, here's one of the reasons the Bible's never boring. There's high drama already. Paul's had his trial before Felix, his trial before Festus, his trial before King Agrippa, and now he's trying to get to Rome for his setting with Caesar. Nothing's going according to plan. My John Deere N manure spreader, in many sense, it's like new. It is 70 years old like me. Got a little surface rust on it. A little paint missing here and there, and a rust hole or two here and there. But for all practical purposes, it's like new. Well, the breakdown that I had Friday, there's this housing that is a bearing. When you think of bearings, you think of little round marbles or like a wheel bearing, a long flat marble that's tapered. Well, this is a bearing that's merely a sleeve. The outside is cast iron and the inside is a completely different material. And that acts as a lubricated bearing, and you can't grease it. But there's no moving parts within this sleeve bearing is what I'm telling you. And I fixed one thing, the table that brings manure to the back of the spreader wasn't moving if I kicked the tractor into neutral. But as long as the tractor was moving, everything worked fine. Well, when you kick the tractor in neutral and you come to a stop and the PTO is still running, it should still be spreading manure. Well, that all stopped. Didn't take me very long to find out what was wrong with that. I fixed that, and I'm at the Quonset hut, and I'm going, yes! And no sooner did I have that joyous celebration, I'm looking at the ground underneath the manure spreader, but the problem is I'm looking through that bearing I'm telling you about. It had split in half. Literally, it had split in half. And it fell out its holder. Well, thanks be to God, the shaft, the dry shaft, wasn't scarred by the holder that held this split in half bearing in place. Not everything goes as planned. I didn't plan on working on that spreader. I didn't plan on not being able to find parts for that spreader. I spent 4 hours on the phone Friday trying to find parts, and everybody I called, obsolete, don't have any. I know out there somewhere on a John Deere's dealer's shelves is one of these bearings, because every manure spreader has about 10 of these bearings on it. And they made umpty-ump models of spreaders that all had these bearings on there. They made millions of these bearings. Well, I found one in Wisconsin. I know there's only $1 worth of material in this thing, but it cost me $90. And that was for the cast iron housing, and I had to pay $30 from McMaster Carr for the bronze oil impregnated sleeve that'll go on the inside, but it won't go on the inside until I take it to a machine shop and have 62 thousandths machined off of it. So it was $30 for that part, and I have no idea what it's going to cost me to get somebody to machine it for me. These guys had intended to get on their ship and go about their merry little lives, sailing across the miniature pond called the Mediterranean Sea. 9. Now, when much time was spent, and when sailing was now dangerous, because the fast was now already past, Paul admonished them. Well, the fast there in verse 9 is referring to the great day of atonement found in Leviticus 23:27. And this was a day of remembrance within Judaism for when they got stupid. It was remembering the account of the whole nation of Israel worshiping the golden calf while Moses is up on Mount Sinai getting the Ten Commandments from God. And in the middle of that, the Lord says to Moses, you need to get back down off the mountain and see what the kids are up to in camp. You're not going to like what you're going to find. I can just see Paul going, you've got to be kidding me. Can't take your eyes off of them for 1 minute. It's like Paco and Teddy. If one of them or both of them has disappeared, I mean, you can't find them, you need to go find out. They're leaving you a bank deposit somewhere. They're pretty good about whining and looking at you with doe eyes, and that is their signal. You better take me outside or the problem's yours. Moses goes down and there's the whole nation in a frenzy dancing around the fire and dancing around the golden calf. And here is the dumbest statement ever made by anybody on the planet. Moses walks up to Aaron. Where'd that golden calf come from? Aaron says, I don't know. I just took some gold and threw it in the fire and poof, out come this golden calf. We all know about the used car salesman, don't we? People who can look you straight in the eye with a heartwarming smile on their face, and they are lying to you through their teeth. Well, the great day of atonement was a fast in the nation of Israel when they were called to remember the day they got stupid. Paul admonished them was the last words we read in verse 9. 10. And said unto them, Sirs, I perceive that this voyage will be with hurt and much damage, not only of the lading, that's the goods they're hauling, and the ship, but also of our lives. I'm going to read the next verse right now, and then we're going to put the two together. Nevertheless, the centurion, that is Julius, believed the master and owner of the ship more than those which were spoken by Paul. Those things which were spoken by Paul. Here's what we need to remember. At this time in Paul's life, Paul had already endured 3 shipwrecks. So it's not like Paul is a virgin on a voyage. I think if Melissa told me correctly, this is her first voyage. I don't know if it's Seth's first voyage or not. So when Paul is looking at the weather, he's looking at what they've been through. They're in the middle of bad winds again. Bad sailing season is upon them when most ships were put to port for that part of the sailing season. And they're pressing on. So Paul's looking at his past experience, And he's saying to the master of the ship, I don't think you should go. Well, Lee, could he have had divine inspiration? Well, we're going to find out that at one time in this discussion, yes, indeed, he does. At the time he makes this statement, most theologians, they cannot agree that it is that situation. Zane just tells us that Seth has been on gospel cruises before. With one of his friends was a promoter of those gospel cruises. Thank you, Zane. I forgot all about that. So, was he under divine inspiration when he makes this statement? Could have been. Maybe not. It could have been based on his sailing experience. But nonetheless, the centurion believed the master. So when the guy from Rome, who is in charge of the ship's movement, talks to the master, the owner of the ship, he follows. He says, sail on. Paul says, no. He followed the wrong advice. You ever done that in your life? Wouldn't you like to go back to the day Bitcoin was introduced to the world? It sold for $1. Just think, if I'd have bought $1,000 worth of Bitcoin opening day, Darla and I could live in the Taj Mahal. Well, isn't hindsight hunky-dory? Well, we're about to find out. Yes, indeed, it is. And we got 4 minutes. We're not going to make the end of this chapter. 12. And because the haven was not commodious to winter in, the more part advised to depart thence also, if by any means they might attain to Phoenice, and there to winter, which is a haven of Crete, and lieth toward the southwest and northwest. So they took a vote, and everybody said, let's sail. Let's take our chances. Staying here for the winter is a no-go. Let's see what happens if we can make it to a better port that is more protected in the winter. We're going to leave off with verse 12. I don't know if I'll be preaching this Sunday morning or not. I'm just going to let the Lord continue to put this Paul and prison time in my mind. What I have noticed, probably more than any other time I've ever looked at this, which I have several, is Paul's attitude during the whole entire account. You ever had a sorry attitude day? Yeah, preachers have them too. I have said to Darla, you might want to go somewhere else. Through this whole prison ordeal, I keep getting this sense, even though he's standing on his own two legs, and he's being rather firm about his mistreatment and how he's being falsely accused while he's doing the right thing, I sense that he is irritated and a little angered, but he's also maintaining as a 30,000 foot view kind of, it's not my problem, God, it's yours. I'm your servant. I'll serve where I'm at or wherever you put me at. And I find it awesome through this 4-year prison stint. He'd already been in jail 2 years. Now he's going to Rome. He's going to be in jail 2 more years. So he's in jail for 4 years. This is 2025. 4 years for us is really easy to understand because we go back to the beginning of COVID when all our lives changed. So we can't identify losing 4 years of our life. Well, while Paul was in his prison time frame, he's building the church. He's writing letters to the churches. He's instructing, he's guiding, he's teaching, and he's preaching to the churches. He is leading. That's an example for you and for me. Sunday morning, 9:45 a.m., right there in the building, Sunday school. And 10:30 a.m., Sunday morning worship. Be with us, either in the flesh or right there where you are tonight. Do us a large. Click that share button. Well, Lee, why does that matter? It puts the word out in front of people. I listened to a story today on the radio about a young lady who was into alcoholism, loose living, all the while putting on a facade of being a very studious Christian. And one day she turned on the radio and she heard the gospel for the first time where it reached her heart. She knelt right there beside her bedside that day and dedicated her heart and life to Jesus Christ that day. And that evening, one of her former friends came over with a case of beer and some marijuana cigarettes, and they were going to partay. And she told her friend, I'm not going to do that. And her friend wafted under her nose the beer and wafted under her nose the cigarettes and said, oh, yes, you are. And she says, you don't understand. God changed my life last night beside my bed when I yielded my life to him. And I will never touch another drop of alcohol as long as I live, nor will I smoke another marijuana cigarette the rest of my life. I am dedicating my life totally and completely to the Lord Jesus Christ. You see, when you click that share button, there could be somebody like this lady who's right on the edge of a decision. Perhaps something we've said tonight or we'll say Sunday morning, that the minute they hear that, God brings a divine appointment, what needs to be heard and what is being told so that it can be heard. Wouldn't it be great when we get to heaven? The Lord shows us all the times in our lives where behind the scenes He's making things happen. He's changing lives because of something we have done. Good night. God bless. And remember, we do love and appreciate every single one of you.